Diana Cattani at the office of Macomb Catholic Services on 15945 Canal Road in Clinton Township, Michigan. Ms. Cattani is, how old are you?
71.
71,
Yes.
and being born in 1937.
1934.
34? I'm sorry.
1934.
Wow.
Yes, I remember
Okay.
it well.
And you currently live
In Harrison Township.
in Harrison Township.
Yeah.
My name is Butch Koff, and I will be the interviewer today. I just met Diana, and Paul Wilhelm will be our videographer. Sitting in as guests are Dave Brousseau and Steve Lutz. Before we get into your veterans experience, Diana, can I call you Diana?
Surely.
Okay. Let's start at the beginning. Tell us a little bit about yourself, where you were born, where did you grow up, go to school, and how you ended up in your branch of service.
I was born in Henry Ford Hospital in the city of Detroit. And I always mention that because that was big in those days. I went to Grand Elementary School. I lived in Detroit as a youngster. I went to Grand Elementary School, went on to Pershing High School, and then went on to Wayne State University, which was Wayne University at that point. I was going to teach home economics, and I was doing very well. And I liked it, except I had to live at home, and that became rather difficult. So I thought of something that I could do that would be good, because I think it's important to do good and to do well, to join the military, because I would have some place to live, something to eat, and something to study, to learn. And I wanted to see something of the world, and I found it very interesting. Even just getting on the train and going to Lackland was interesting, because they actually had deserts and big bodies of water and all kinds of things that I thought were just someone's imagination. When, as a child, I saw them in pictures. I used to go
So you enlisted?
I enlisted. They asked me, did I want to be an officer, because actually I tested very well, but I wasn't feeling very secure in myself in those days. So.
And you had a degree from Wayne?
No, I didn't yet. I didn't yet have the degree. I still don't have a degree. I had about 3 years at Wayne and odd and sundry classes over at Macomb that I wanted to take it in accounting, especially there, which helped me in my career after that. So I spent, about a year, I forget how long, from July of 1953 to October of 1954 in the Air Force. And during that time, I went to basic training at Lackland Air Force Base. I think it was for 9 weeks, 8 weeks, something.
Was that your first time out of the Detroit area?
Yes. And everything was very strange. I heard a little tiny girl. She was the cutest little thing with little black hair and all kinds of freckles. And she opened her mouth to speak, and I thought she was teasing, but she was from Brooklyn. And I would stare at her for a while until I got used to it. But everybody had different accents and different ways of dressing and behaving, and I thought that was very interesting. Some were from California and from, I don't know, all over.
Did you mention that Lackland? Where was that at?
Lackland is in San Antonio, Texas. And our big weekend that we got to go out, we went to the San Antonio Zoo, which was pretty thrilling. They had an enormous python there. The biggest thing I ever saw. It was huge.
Well, tell us a little bit about your experience in basic training and what you thought both the physical and educational part of.
Well, they gave us a lot of it was remedial. They wanted us to be, to know how to do math and language skills and learn rules and be able to follow them without question. To be able to have our gear, whatever it was, our clothing, all in absolute order and iron starched, and no more than 2 pieces of laundry in your laundry basket at any given time, which, trust me, was very difficult in those days to only have 2 pieces of laundry in there. So we'd wash things out at night and hang them over the bed thing, and then put them away in the morning.
How do you feel about that discipline?
Well, I had always been taught to be very neat, so, but yeah, 2 pieces of laundry was a little bit much, I thought. I think, you know, laundry bags for laundry. And it's not that easy to do the laundry. There wasn't as if you had machines, etc., readily available. So that wasn't so very easy. But I did fine, and during that whole time I got exactly one gig because I placed a box the wrong way in my closet. So I got 1 gig in that whole time. I was annoyed with myself, let me put it that way. I got through it just fine. They marched us from one end to the other, and we had all kinds of honors for marching because we spent a lot of time on our feet. I swear it was 9 hours a day on our feet marching. And of course, when we went through the chow line, we had to go to stand at attention, take 2 feet forward, and anyway, march to food. And so that it was very, very regimented, and there was really very little time that we weren't being taken care of. We all lived together in barracks. All women were together. We were called WAFs. It wasn't anything. It wasn't as it is now at all. It's very different. We didn't learn how to use guns or anything like that because they knew we weren't going to be fighting. Although I don't think it would have hurt many of us to fight, but they didn't in those days anyway. Anyway, I think we were all physically stronger and mentally stronger too by the time all that was done. We did things like KP, which was something less than thrilling. Especially when you were the one who was short and got the big pots, those great big huge monstrous things that they do things like cook mashed potatoes in. That was a little on the hard side, but we managed. Some poor guy had to come in and do the trash, the dumping stuff down the trash and stuff in the sewer, and that we didn't have to lift the whole thing full or anything like that. We had some guy come in and do it. That's the only thing the men came in and did that we didn't do. Everything else we did ourselves.
Did you mention that you went in May? Was it hot down there?
No, I actually went at the beginning of July.
Oh.
And yeah, it was hot, but it was very dry, and I didn't seem to mind that very much. It went up to 110 or something, and we were out there marching, and I learned to drink Dr. Pepper. I learned to really, really, really appreciate Dr. Pepper. I don't think I could have made it without Dr. Pepper.
That product wasn't up here in the Detroit area.
No, no. That was very new. That was very new, and I drank it. If they had one of those machines that sold pop, I got Dr. Pepper.
So
I find that amusing to this day.
I think it's very amusing. So in boot camp, were you being tested for your future, I don't know what you would call it, job description?
Well, they gave us a long test, and they rated us in perhaps 7 categories or so. I didn't do very well at all with the mechanical part because I am not mechanically minded. But when it came to the things that had to do with administration and office procedure, I forget the exact titles of them, I did very, very well in that. And what they wound up doing was giving me a stripe and sending me over to Keesler Air Force Base down in Biloxi, Mississippi, which was a sleepy little town then, and nobody ever heard the word casino in those days. It was a little bitty town. Lovely people in town. The church ladies would give us, chicken dinners and pecan pie, and I remember their pecan pie to this day, and that was a long time ago. But there I went through a course for radio operations. So we did Morse code, among other things, and voice communications, and they said I had a really good voice that carried well at that time, so, and clear. And so I did a lot of that kind of thing, studying for that. And I graduated actually at the top of my class, and there were only a few WAFs who were in the class. They were all men.
So it was a co-ed.
That was, yes, but there were, you know, there was me and 40 guys, you know. We still all lived together in a WAF barracks, right next to the flight line. I will never forget that either, because those airplanes are big and noisy, and they rattled everything. And that barracks were very old. They rattled too. Anyway, I went through the whole course. I graduated top of the class, and in their infinite intelligence, and I say that with my eyes closed almost, they sent me to Selfridge Air Force Base so I could be a clerk typist in an operations squadron. So I was sort of sitting in a kind of garage setting with a desk doing paperwork of varying kinds. And I couldn't imagine, after being first in my class, that they did that to me, but they did.
How long was your training there?
Oh, I don't know, 4 or 5, 6 months. It seemed like a long time.
Was that another
really,
hot spot?
How do you mean? I don't know what you mean, hot spot.
Humid, weather-wise?
Yes, you couldn't leave your shoes on the floor, for instance, because it was so very humid. We had to put our shoes upside down, hang them on nails, do anything, because they could not stay on the floor because they would mold. We had to be extremely, extremely careful about all our clothing, because everything would smell like mold if you didn't keep it washed up and ironed up and freshened. And again, laundry things, we didn't have dryers. We did have available to us washing machines, so we would wash our clothes. We had to hang them on a line. And as I understood it, the commanding officer's wife suggested that it was not appropriate for us to hang up our clothes on Sunday, so we couldn't do our laundry on Sunday because we couldn't hang it out. But we would do that like on Saturday afternoons and at night when we were out of school or out of work or whatever it was we were doing.
So now you're out of boot camp and you're in your training. Tell us a little bit about your entertainment side of now that you have a little more freedom in Biloxi.
It didn't really feel like a whole lot more freedom in Biloxi, but we could sort of take shared taxis and go into town. And there was a wonderful beach, and as I said, the church ladies were really lovely. And we'd go up and down the street. We could shop and, you know, have something to eat if we wanted to. That was nice, and we could go see movies or something on base. And I always did projects, so at that time I was doing toll painting, and that kept me amused for a while. And then I walked around Back Bay a lot. It was a long way all the way around the flight line, and I'd walk back there to Back Bay, and it was so gorgeous, especially in the evening when the sun was going down. And the colors were absolutely stunning. It was so peaceful and wonderful. It gave a real wonderful respite to the days there.
Now this was during the Korean War conflict. Did you have any feelings about that? Any perspective of what's going on at the time? Being in the service, obviously you're associated with that.
Well, you know, they didn't talk about war. I used to get Time magazine, so I would read up. I needed to know something because they really didn't talk about the war. They didn't talk about why or where or who or how much or anything. And I find today that I am very interested in those kinds of questions, and I'm always looking, and I write articles to the newspaper. I write letters to the president. I tell him he's wrong, period. In every way I can, I tell him he's wrong.
Does he respond back to you?
Never ever. I really don't expect that he's ever going to respond. I don't expect that he's ever read one of my letters. I really expect that somebody reads them, glances at them or something, and says, okay, 52% of those letters say you're doing a good job and 10% say you stink. Something like that.
Well, it's...
Something, you know, quantitatively, not qualitatively.
You've obviously earned the right to have that.
Oh yeah, I
freedom.
think I earned that right to do that. As long as I don't say anything really god awful, I can say what I want.
I'm surprised finishing #1 in your class that they didn't ask you, you know, or reward you with a duty station of your choice.
They never asked me any questions at all about what I wanted to do until the one time when I had to say no. I fell madly in love with a young man, and we married here in my home church. And I got pregnant, which when you're in the military in those days, as soon as you tell them you were pregnant, you see the doctor and you're out that day. You leave the base. So that's what happened. I think that was, they don't do that today, thank God, because it's really stupid for all that training to go down the tubes like that.
Back me up a little bit. Where did you meet this young man?
In school in Biloxi, Mississippi.
Love at first sight.
No, I wouldn't say that. It just seemed like he was a very sweet man. Somebody one could go old with. Didn't happen that way, but that's what it seemed like at the time.
So you met him there. Did you marry him there?
No, I married him up here.
He had assignment up here too?
No, he came up here to marry me, and then he had to go someplace else. He was always going someplace else.
Wow.
He spent a lot of time.
You had that kind of a spell over him that he followed you here, eh?
To marry me, yeah. After that was not quite the same story. No, we together after that had 4 children, including a set of twins. And while I was married to him, I did a lot of traveling. I went to, well, my oldest child was born at Shaw Air Force Base in South Carolina. The other 3 children were born here in Detroit. Because I would come back here, because he was always going somewhere else, wherever it was he was going. He seemed to be gone all the time. But we also went with him to Clovis in Texas.
Was he a lifer?
No, he stayed in about 11 and a half years, 11 years, something like that, and then he finally got out. We also went to, and I worked too at George Air Force Base as a civilian. And we went to Okinawa for 19 months, and I worked there too, in procurement,
But this,
as a civilian.
Yeah, because of the fact you had gotten pregnant, that was a no-no?
That was, you're out,
Okay.
period.
And this is at Selfridge,
That was at Selfridge, yes.
What'd you think about Selfridge? Tell me your experiences there.
My experiences at Selfridge. Well, we WAFs were in one little building that was a temporary building. And we had a brig on the first floor where the bad girls had to be jailed, which wasn't thrilling. And later on they gave us some, if I say well used, that would be an understatement, kind of housing that was closer to the main gate at that time. That part is all gone now. It's been torn down. So, although I have been on base since then for a couple of things, including some hockey games, not hockey games, but games with my grandchildren ran. It's not. It doesn't look at all the same place. Not at all.
And your duties there were just kind of secretarial, clerical?
Mm-hmm. Clerical. Absolutely clerical, nothing more than that.
That was kind of a disappointment for you?
I was terribly disappointed because I felt underused and kind of abused in a way. I felt as a woman that I was being mistreated, that women were not treated fairly, and to this day I believe that. I believe that happens in every place in the whole United States. I mean, I know it's a great deal better, but women still earn, what is it now, 69% of whatever it is that men earn doing the same job. So I still am very interested in women's rights.
That's probably why you write the president.
Well, that's one of the reasons. One of the reasons. That's not the only one, though. No, he...
Did you try and fight the discharge at all? Or?
No, there was no way to fight it. That was the rule. You were gone. You didn't question. As a matter of fact, we were held in such low esteem that we were told we had to sign a document stating that we would never ask or be buried in the main, outside Washington.
Arlington?
Arlington. We would never be buried in Arlington, no matter what the circumstances.
Why is that? because of a chauvinistic,
Well, that was my interpretation, yes, that it was chauvinistic. We were trying to do our job.
what was their explanation?
And not all men had a gun and were fighting either, so.
What was their explanation? Only
They
for...
didn't have an explanation. There was no explanation ever given.
Wow.
And I thought that was really rather awful.
It was very interesting and awful. Have they changed that policy today, do you know?
I don't know if that policy's been changed. I do know they treat women differently, that they're allowed to remain on their job, they remain in their training, and they let them wear maternity clothes for as long as it's necessary, and they help them with child care. And I think that's for the betterment. And although I worry sometimes about them all being mixed up, because I think they're young and they get kind of foolish, because I know I wasn't the smartest person in the world when I was young. And I'm sure everyone can say the same thing, that when you're 18, 19, 20, 21 in that time frame, you're not very worldly. I wasn't worldly.
So your actual career was foreshortened because of a instance that you don't believe should have caused that.
Absolutely.
But your husband was still in the Air Force.
Yes, he was.
And your background training was in the Air Force, so you followed him around. And,
I followed him every time I could, yes.
and it's
Whenever I
still
could.
that Air Force discipline and mentality are with you.
Well, to make it even worse, I started working for the federal government, Department of Defense, and spent 30 years. I retired from the federal government.
And your grade was what? A G?
When I 11, I was a GS 11.
That's pretty high, isn't it?
Well, it is, yes, because I didn't have a degree, that was one thing, but I did pass their college entrance examination, which I was very proud of doing that. It wasn't the college entrance, it was a test for college graduates. I want to be more specific than that. It was, and I passed that very highly. And then I went to Macomb and was taking accounting lessons because accounting training, because that's what I was doing for the government. I worked in Rochester, New York, George Air Force Base, and there was Air Force Contract Management District on Concord in Detroit, and then it moved and became Department of Defense in the old Packard plant, if anybody knows what the old Packard plant was. And from there I moved to, because they closed that down, I moved to TACOM and spent the rest of my career there.
This is after all the Air Force traveling is done?
Yes, yes. Oh, I worked in those other places while some of them was when I was as the wife of a military member. For instance, Okinawa, I was working at Naha Air Base, and we lived on Naha, and at George Air Force Base.
In Okinawa?
George was in California,
Okay.
in the desert. And Clovis, New Mexico, I was there, but I didn't work at that time. I had too many little babies.
Well, if you wouldn't mind, can you tell me a little bit about your overseas, Air Force / civilian experience in Okinawa? How was that?
Well, I worked. I had 4 children at that point, and that was interesting. Again, it was local, what they call local hire, so you didn't get any extra money for being in an overseas area. It was just regular pay, and you paid Social Security, nothing toward retirement or anything like that. It was just that kind of job, like a temporary position. And I worked there, and I thought it was kind of interesting. In procurement, I remember that they bought, I don't know, 200 perhaps black umbrellas at one time because President Eisenhower was going to visit. So they had to have these handy just in case it rained. Now, it didn't rain very often in Okinawa that I can recall. They had a lot of typhoons where we had to be boarded up, but I mean, as a general rule, it didn't, that was seasonal, and it didn't really rain all that much other times. But they bought all these hundreds of umbrellas, and they had them. And he landed, I think, he and his family or his wife landed at Kadena Air Base and drove down the island of Okinawa to Naha. And we were all instructed to be along the roadside. Ladies all had to have dresses and skirts on, no trousers of any kind. And the children all had to be there and had to be dressed up also. The girls had to have little dresses on, and the boys had to have nice little suits or, shirts, nice shirts.
Now, you're a civilian at the time.
I'm a civilian at this
Is it
time.
tough following orders as a civilian?
Well, yes and no at the same time. I'm accustomed to orders. That in and of itself doesn't bother me, as long as they're just. I do recall specifically in Okinawa that we had a car, because I had to drive around, just a little car. And I had to drive someplace. I don't know, it was to the PX or something, or get groceries, something. And there was this enormous display of bloody, gory, horrible, mangled bodies and twisted cars. And my children took one look at that horror and they were screaming and crying. It was really awful, really, really awful. And it upset me so much that my children were upset so much that when I got back home, I phoned the commander of the base and I told him what I thought about that sign and how much it frightened my children. Now, one doesn't do that, okay? But I did. And he said, well, they put it up there because the men are not careful. I said, yes, but you have children here and women here too, and they don't need to see that. I mean, it really frightened my children terribly. And the other thing I remember about being a civilian in there is I had all these little children. Two of them, the twins, were barely above being toddlers. They were 9 months old when we got there, so they were just little guys. And one of them fell and hurt his shoulder. And I took him to Anaha, the medic area. And they never showed him to a doctor, just a nurse, a medic. I don't know what he was. I don't know. He was in uniform, but he wasn't a doctor. And he said, well, tell him to exercise his arms, and he did one of these, make a move, and he'll be fine. So I said, all right. So, the kid is crying and crying for 3 days. That child cried and cried and cried. And I looked at his shoulder, and it was like this, but this part of his shoulders was a good inch below this part. So I went back there, and I took my child there, and I had this confrontation. Now, normally I'm a peaceful person. I was really, really, really upset that time. So he said, the guy at the desk said, well, somebody already saw you, he's okay. And I said, he's not okay. I said, he's crying, he's been crying for the last 3 days, and, nobody's paying him any attention. Nobody even examined him. Nobody x-rayed him. Nobody did anything. But they kept telling me that he was all right. And I said, look at his shoulder. And you could see that it had dropped down, that they weren't even. It was like this. And he said, well, that's, And anyway, I said, I'm going to pick up this typewriter and I'm going to throw it right at you if he doesn't get to see a doctor. I mean, I was really livid.
Yeah, you're not confrontational, but go
no,
ahead.
I can be confrontational. Well, you don't mess with a mother
You're
who's
not
got a
playing with
little
kids
kid
in hell.
who's not getting the kind of help that he needs. So finally, a doctor came there and they said, well, finally, a mother knew what she was talking about. And he had this part of his bone, was clavicle, was pressing down and was just touching his lung or something right there. And he was in great danger. And he had not even seen a doctor until I actually had to threaten with physical violence. Now that was terrible. So of course, we had to get on a bus, not even an ambulance, a bus, and go to the hospital on another base for him to be x-rayed and examined and put that kind of, sort of like a figure-8 cast on him.
What's your husband doing at this time? Is he...
Oh, he was always absent.
Oh.
He was a husband who wasn't there. He was never there. He just was, he could be living with us and he just wasn't there. You could look this up in the dictionary, but I always thought of him as being feckless. Ineffectual as a parent. He just wasn't. He was, he had a band and he liked to be adulated. He had a band, so they all got these uniforms, and they would play in the various clubs on the island, and he would be practicing. So, and he loved the women coming up to him and gooing and guying over him, which I thought was a little much, but anyway. My face is very red from saying all this stuff.
Well, I don't want to take his journey any further right now. Let's go back to your son, and you come to the other hospital.
Yeah, well, they decided that he had a totally broken clavicle in 2 pieces, and that he needed to be casted immediately, and they needed to take great care of him because he was in very great danger of his lung.
Thanks to his mom's knowledge and concern.
As I said, I don't take these things lightly.
No, ma'am.
Never mess with a mother.
Never mess with a mother. Okay. So now that's the experience that your boy had. One of the twins, was it?
One of my twins.
One of the twins. And so you're in Okinawa, and that was kind of an overseas experience. Any other interesting things?
Well, it was just interesting because I went to see things like them making stoneware and lacquerware in China and linens. That was all I found that very interesting.
Was there a little bit of poverty there that you had not seen before? I mean,
well, they lived extremely different than anything I had ever seen. Well, of course, they had no running water and no bathrooms. That didn't help a whole lot for them. But they grew vegetables. They used the pieces of the atoll to surround their gardens. But they fertilized it with human waste. And of course, we were told to never ever buy or eat anything that came from the local economy because it may not be safe for us. I never did. But at the time, when you went to shop at the store, you could buy a whole loaf of bread for 10 cents, you know. And they had pretty much the things that we needed, except for clothing. That was a little harder to get. But I had a mother who loved to shop, so she would do the shopping here and send clothes to the kids a lot. I paid her for them, but anyway, she did the shopping. She was a wonderful shopper.
Now, you're still somewhat associated with the military because your husband's in the Air Force. Did you see any...
No, I divorced him.
Oh.
Oh, yes.
Then?
I divorced him. I was married to him for 11 and a half years, and I divorced him because when he came back from Cambodia or North Korea or wherever the heck it was that last time, he went home to live with his mother in Florida and never left again.
Mm-hmm.
So I stayed married to him for some years after that, and I was living, as I said, in Rochester, New York at the time with my sister and her husband. And we sort of pooled our resources because he was getting his doctorate and I was working, and my sister stayed home and took care of all the kids. And we pooled our money and our physical resources and did all kinds of work together. So.
Well, I was going to ask why you were married to him during that period of time and your association with the Air Force as a civilian. Did you see any change in the rights of the female military, or you didn't get close enough to...
You mean of late? Well,
or back then, was it still the same?
It was like that until, I don't know, another 20 years or something. I don't know. A very long time, it seemed to me. We didn't see too many women, military women, in the offices that I worked as a civilian. We had a few who were at TACOM, but mostly they were men. I was a supervisor at one point in charge of military pay, travel pay, and commercial pay. And so I did have some military members under me. They were sergeants, and they didn't like it that I was a civilian. They really hated it. That
They were jealous, probably.
Well, I don't know about jealousy, but they certainly didn't like it, and they let me know they didn't like it.
Did you let them know that was too bad?
Sort of. Sort of, yeah. Because we have jobs to do and we're supposed to do them, but I always had difficulty with, if you have a rule, you follow it, okay? You tell me a rule and I will follow it. But if you don't follow it and you don't have other people following it, then it's not a rule and it should be gone. It should be changed, it should be abolished, it should be something. That goes for laws too today. Because I never saw some of these things adhering to old policies that don't make any sense at all or that are demeaning to people. They should be changed.
Were you able to further your education after the service with any of the GI Bills or anything?
No, I didn't. No. I had all these little guys, and it took me between that and supporting them full time. For a while, I couldn't go back to school. I couldn't take advantage of the GI Bill, although I could have. Technically, I could have. I simply couldn't because I only had so many personal resources, so much energy, so much time. But I did take classes here and there as they got older more classes at Wayne and again, some classes at Macomb when that was a little bit easier. So I did further my education. It isn't that I neglected it, but it took me a while to get around to it.
So your journey finally ended up here in Detroit again?
Mm-hmm.
Where your family is?
Yes, my family is all from Detroit, in this area. Of course, my brother and sister haven't lived in this area for a lot of years, but the family at large is from this area, and I'm comfortable here. I guess I'm an East Side Detroiter, and that's part of what I am.
Well, before we end, I just, today, many years later now, and some of your experiences in the military, some of your travel experiences / civilian military, what are your feelings? What did you gain from that? Obviously, you're a lady that likes to see change for the better.
I'm not quite sure you want me to enlarge upon that too much.
Well,
but I think there's a great deal that needs to be done, and although I fully support our military members because God knows they're doing what they're supposed to do, and I think overall they're doing it very well. I think their leadership is of the absolute worst kind, careless, uncomprehending, and do not choose to listen, and I despair of our current administration.
Any of your children get to serve?
No, none of my children elected to serve. Actually, I had a picture of I had a picture of their father. That was a hand painting of him. I asked my children if any one of them wanted that particular picture, and they said no. I don't even know who he is, so I don't know. But these people are going there, and they're not supported, and they're not planned for, and that to me is just horrible, just absolutely horrible.
Well, before we close, I noticed you brought in a picture of your beautiful self.
When I was very young.
Is this in Mississippi or
no,
in Texas?
No, that was in Texas. That was in San Antonio at Lackland Air Force Base, Texas.
And what rate were you?
At that time, basic, airman basic, because I was just in when they first take your pictures. I was just barely in.
So, and then what rate did you finally discharge at?
I had 2 stripes by the time I...
what is that called? Sergeant?
No.
Oh, Airman second class?
At that time, yeah. Airman second class. I would have liked to have stayed in because at that point I would have had an opportunity to be a control tower operator. I was asked if I wanted to do that, and I really wanted to do that.
You were
but-
ready to jump at that.
With open arms, I was ready to jump at that one, but I couldn't because they threw me out.
I think
That's what it felt like.
that
that's
was
what it felt like.
their error, their
Yes, it was
mistakes.
that was their mistake.
So, anything you'd like to finish up and say to people out there, the archives, the Library of Congress, any fellow WAFs that you might think of something,
I wish all of them very well, and I hope they will be treated very well by the government and by the people. I never want to see people being treated as the Vietnam veterans were. I think they should be applauded, cherished, prayed for, thought of, sent boxes to, whatever they can do to make their lives a little bit better, because it's got to be pretty horrible. And I love them all. I am very military, I guess, oriented, and I love the military.
you still have that military discipline in your life right now?
Yes. Yes.
Are you crying or laughing?
Half and half. Half and half.
Well, Diana, I appreciate you coming in today. I know you were a little nervous about how uninteresting you thought this interview would be, but I am glad that I heard these stories. I know for a little bit of time you were there, your heart and mind were there, and unfortunately it didn't work out like you planned, but yet again you took away the disciplines and the other things at the service, and you know what it's all about, and I'm honored that you served our country.
I feel I served my country as well as a civilian, and I'm very proud of that, and I fly my Air Force flag
Yes,
and
ma'am.
my American flag,
Yes, ma'am.
and I'm very proud of it. Very proud
Gentlemen,
of
do
it.
you have any questions you'd like to ask her before we close?
No, I'd like to thank you for sharing your story. It's truly
Thank you.
I would like you to know that President Bush reviews all of these videos personally.
Does he really? I hope he hears what I had to say. I don't think he reviews them personally.
You know, if I was the president, I think I would enjoy very much hearing what you had to say. I think it was a very personal presentation. The information you shared was very useful, and if I was making those kind of decisions, it wasn't slanted. So I think these are the kind of things that people that make those decisions and those leaders should see.
I also think that some of the things you say, people that hear them should also not only listen to them, but feel what you say. And maybe that'll help make change.
Well, you know, I love this country. My parents came from Europe. Well, sorry. My mother is a German Lutheran born in Russia and educated in Canada. My father was educated in Italy. They came to the United States as very young children. They didn't have accents. My father was very, very, very concerned that we would consider ourselves American. We only spoke English, although my father's first language was Italian and my mother's first language was German. We only spoke English because we were Americans, and I always remember that in my heart and soul, that we are Americans first, no matter where you come from.
Yes, ma'am. I agree. Thank you, Diana.
Thank you.
I'm very proud to have met you.